and welcome to A Drummer's Guide to, the podcast all about the things that it takes to be a professional musician aside from actually playing your instrument. My name is Emily Dolan Davies. I've been a drummer since 1999, professional since 2008, and helping other musicians to become professional since 2018. That is why we are here today. So, today's episode is actually inspired by one of my students who, at the end of last year, so I don't know when you're listening to this, maybe you're not in real time, but up to date, but maybe not. So at the back end of 2024, one of my students named Louis, shout out Louis, did his first gig with a named artist. And first of all, so proud, such a proud moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. So he did this show with Ella Henderson, who is an artist in the UK, a singer in the UK. And we sort of had been working towards this for a while, basically. And to say he nailed it would be the understatement of the century. But what I thought was we'd actually had a conversation off the back of the lead up to the actual gig. And I thought it would be a really useful episode to cover, which is essentially like sorry, I don't know what happened to my throat there. What is actually needed for your first big gig? Like, what do you physically need to do for your first gig, like for a named artist? Because I think when you do get to that point, it's like, oh my God, what am I meant to be doing? Like, I'm meant to be professional. I'm meant to know what I'm doing. And what am I meant to be doing? And let me tell you, first of all, completely normal. Completely normal reaction. I very much had the same reaction on my sort of first professional gig and named gig, should we say. And I think for me personally, at least in my head, I very much, unfortunately, I had this thing that was in my head that I should be professional. I should know what I'm doing all of the time. And therefore, I found it very hard to reach out for help and for advice because I didn't want to be seen to be inexperienced, essentially. So I thought that I'd do this episode in case you're kind of in that position in one respect or another. So at least there's sort of some starting point, I'd say. Let me tell you actually, first though, categorically, if you reach out for help from people, it's not a thing. It's not as big a thing as you're making out. Trust me, like, even if you feel that you should have all the answers, you shouldn't. And actually, it's really nice when someone reaches out for advice, for help. Obviously, I do my coaching, but people will, just reach out with random little bits anyway. And there's something I enjoy the fact that I'm able to give my experience to help those that are coming up. And I think I can confidently say 99.999% of musicians that I know, in fact 100% of musicians that I know, would be more than willing, nigh on happy to share their expertise and help in any way that they can to kind of shed some light on what needs to be done. But I thought, right, let's just do an episode on this. So I will just go through some of the things that I feel. Okay, let me rephrase. This is how I approach gigs. Sorry, I sound like an idiot. Anyway, but this is my approach when it comes to be honest, it's any gig. But let's talk in the situation of named artists. I'm hoping that I can remember some examples of when these things sort of happened to me and various things. So the first prerequisite that I would like to say is that when you're preparing for a named artist gig, as it were. By the way, sorry if I'm a little less animated than usual, or like my shoulders are going if you're watching this, if you're able to watch this, but my hands are firmly between my legs because it's so cold in here right now. That's why I've got a hat on, the whole shebang. The radiator is on, but it's taking its sweet time. So anyway, named gig. Let's say you get the call for an artist that not only you have heard of, but other people have actually heard of as well. At that stage, the first prerequisite that I would like to say is I hope and I would expect and I would assume, because I don't know it to happen any other way, that you already have a lot of experience under your belt when it comes to playing live with different artists, with different bands. I don't know of anyone that gets the call for a named artist who has not been treading the boards for years. So if you're not currently treading the boards, if you're not currently out there gigging in empty pubs, bars, doing function gigs, all that stuff, if you're not doing that right now and you're expecting to get a phone call from a named artist or someone related to a named artist, I'd say it's highly unlikely. Let me just start by saying that, because I don't know why there's this image, and I had this growing up. You know, you only see on socials or whatever else, you see the big gigs that people do, but you don't see all the little gigs that they do where, like I say, it's an empty room that you're playing to, or, you know, you just don't see all the other stuff that isn't glamorous and isn't, because nobody, like, I don't know, people just don't talk about it. It's part of the reason I talk about it. But let me tell you, you know, in 2008, when I got my first named gig, as it were, I'd already done hundreds, probably over 1,000 gigs at that stage, in pubs, in clubs, for no money, for little money, function gigs, gigs with smaller artists. Like I was doing the thing. Like I'd been doing it for years. I'd been playing out gigging since I was 11, essentially, and then I was 20 at that point. So 9 years of it, with people that you have never heard of. You have never heard of? I had never heard of until I started playing with them, which is sad, actually. Some of them really could have done something, but just didn't happen that way, unfortunately. So that's the first sort of prerequisite that I want to say, that, you know, unless you're out there gigging, doing the thing already, it's unlikely you're going to get the call. So I just wanted to say that. So let's hope that, or no, I would assume, because as I say, it's very unlikely that you're getting this call unless you already have experience, because A, the experience side of it, but also you've met other musicians, you've got a network of musician friends that have probably called you to get on this gig. So let's just say that right up front. So you get the call, and obviously you will have a point of reference in terms of the experience that you already have, but there are some key things that I think are worth finding out about the gigs so you can best prepare yourself for them. So the first thing would be the song list. I would say set list, but unlikely that there would be a set list that early on, because set lists are usually sorted out in the rehearsal room, but certainly a song list. So a list of songs that will probably be in the set. Now I say probably because anything can happen, as we know. It's pretty crazy, it can be. So a song list, and take that with a pinch of salt. Then also you want to ask what the lineup is, like the rest of the band, who else is going to be in the band, whether it's people that you know. That can be useful because you can sort of like chat and whatnot, or just knowing what the lineup is instrument wise, because then you will know more about the parts that you'll be covering. For instance, I, as a drummer, if I come in and there's a percussionist, I know, okay, well, I will not have to cover certain parts because they probably will, or I can have a chat to them, we can work out what those parts are. Often, as I've spoken about, I go into situations where it's a double drummer gig, and then there is a conversation to be had of like, right, what parts do you want? What parts do I want? Let's see what we can create, you know, and make it really fun. In line with that is also the setup of the band in terms of not just the instruments, but also are they running track? Are they running clicks? If they're running track, they will be running clicks. Do they need you to play electronics if you're a drummer? Or say you're a keys player, do they need you to play bass, like synth bass kind of thing? Or is there a bass player who also, if you're a bass player, do you need to be able to play, say, like Moog synth, because that is often used, especially in modern gigs. I say in modern gigs, she says, thinking about a gig that she did 10 years ago, and therefore not a modern gig anymore. So don't listen to me on that front, but it is worth having a conversation of like, right, what is expected from my role? Especially I feel as a drummer, because often also drummers will run track. So if you don't have experience in that, now is time to get that learning head on and learn, like, know what system they're using, learn how to use it, all that sort of stuff. Also finding out if they're, very important, monitoring. What is happening with monitoring? Is it monitors on stage? Is it in-ears? If it's in-ears, do you have your own in-ears? Also, if it's wired in-ears, so are you going to be on a wire on stage, or is it going to be in-ears with packs? If they are with packs, like wireless packs, often that will be that will be provided. But in-ears, no. Honestly, like generally speaking, you should have your own in-ears if you're coming onto a gig that is using in-ears. What I will also say is, please get molded in-ears. Yes, they're expensive, but I ruined my hearing by having generics and doing one gig. It was one gig. It's a shame. I love these in-ears. They sound great. But it was one gig, and it was with Cher Lloyd, and it was in a tent. And because it was in a tent, I don't know what was happening. I'm sure someone can tell me that is much smarter than I am. But the sound was kind of coming back on me. So what it meant was I had to turn up my in-ears. And what that also meant is that like my ears were wrecked for, well, arguably full stop. They were wrecked. And I hear so many stories about things like that. So if you're going to get in-ears, please do the molded versions just for your own safety, so you don't have to be turning it up super loud to hear anything, because yeah, that can get problematic. By the way, apologies for this sun. The sun, I love the sun. Hello sun, you're lovely, but you're also blinding me slightly and probably washing me out on the feed here. But anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. So yes, monitoring, very important to know what is happening with that, and in terms of what to expect, and I'll go on to why that is as well for later on in the process. Also worth asking about rehearsals, for instance. Obviously, where are the rehearsals? Always good to know. But equally, are there rehearsals? There might not be. How many days are there of rehearsals? What does a rehearsal day look like, i.e. time-wise? Is it 10 till 6? Is it 12 till 8? Is it 10 till 10, or is there just no kind of like, it's kind of is what it is kind of situation? I've been in rehearsals where we've done days that are literally like 3 hours long, and I'm like, really? Are we done? Okay, all right, fine, that's fine. Also, are you going to get a sound check? This may sound like such given things. Of course you get a sound check. No. So I know, well, a friend of my sister's, he is out with the Sugar Babes, and his first gig with them is it's in Australia, and no sound check because it's a festival. That's his first gig with them. I mean, this happens. Do you know what I mean? So also, if the gigs that you're doing, or if it's a one-off show, whatever, if it's abroad, when are you flying in? When is the gig, so you know how much time you've got? If it's a time difference that is substantial, like Australia, very important to know what you have to work with and plan your time to make sure that you're as well rested as you can be, and prepared to sort of be on the plane and all that sort of stuff. So all these things, all these logistics that will inform the job that you're doing and how you're going to do it is very, very important. And again, you can sort of find this out from the musical director, the management, just whoever is kicking about that hopefully will have this information, maybe even the artists themselves, maybe. Unlikely, but possibly. So anyway, those are kind of the baseline things I think that need to be covered to get you going, at least. And then off the back of asking the questions, which again, I was very bad at. I would guess these things, and I look back at myself and I just go, my goodness, if you'd have just asked the question, to me it made me feel like I was being unprofessional, but it was actually completely the opposite. It's just like what happened for me. I had this a couple of times where I had people reaching out to me being like, do you need any information? And actually I ended up looking unprofessional because I didn't ask the questions, if that makes sense. I only realised that now, sort of years down the line. But to me, I was just like, no, I just don't want to bother anyone. That was my whole thing back then. Is it like, people like to know that A, you're invested, and B, you're asking the questions because you're doing the work and you're making them feel safe. So go ask the questions. It's a very positive thing. Very, very, very. I'm kind of talking to my former self there, and sort of my current self a little bit, because I still get stuck in that trap, definitely, where I'm like, oh, I can't actually just ask a question. So after that point, once I kind of have the the bare bones of what needs to be done, what the setup is. I can kind of, for me, also with things like rehearsals, sometimes rehearsals run in very specific ways. So I like to ask the question about how do they actually run, so I can get a visual in my head. I'm a very visual person. I like to be able to imagine what the process is going to look like, and it was very, 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 very important to understand that. Also on the gig, like understanding how the gig runs, it was very, very important for me on two specific gigs that I have spoken about at length. Tricky in 2011, very important to know not just how his rehearsals ran, but also the gigs, especially because, like, especially with him, first time I ever played with Tricky was on stage in Turkey, and I'd only met him that day. So very, very, I'm going to use the word obscure gig. No, it's not obscure, it's just very unique the way that he runs his shows. Equally with the Voice Kids, very, very specific how they run the show, because it has to be very tight turnarounds, it has to be very effective. I love it. It's like my dream, like the way that they run that gig. It's like everything is with a purpose. They shave off all the fat, and it's just all about getting the job done in the most effective way possible. It's very cool, very my kind of vibe. But anyway, but knowing how those ran definitely informed me of how I needed to learn the songs, what I needed to learn. Because, for instance, with Tricky, if you look at learning the songs, there was no point in learning the songs because we never played the songs. We played versions of the songs. We played an intro, a verse, and a chorus in the most random, configurations you could ever think of, and we would only know the configuration of, or the structure of the song, as we were playing it on stage, which sounds insane, and it's absolutely insane. It's also very, very, very thrilling is the right word. You've got to be eagle eyes on him at all times, and you've got to know where you're going, what you're about to do, just by a few hand movements. So yeah, very important to know that. Otherwise, I would have learnt songs as songs, and I would have come into rehearsals and been completely at a loss. Like, I would have done all this extra work for something that was not relevant to the gig. So always good to ask a question. So ask a question. Sorry, I keep harping back round to this, but always ask the questions. So the next sort of stage, once I have the base information, if you like, I do all the peripheral information for me, which is doing my own research, and that is looking at the live shows, looking back on YouTube at live shows that have happened, just getting a visual of how they actually work. Again, this is so useful in things like The Voice Kids, because I'd never watched a full episode of The Voice before. I knew what it was, but I hadn't watched it, so just to know the format was very useful. Also doing things like learning songs outside of the song list that you have, so the back catalogue, very useful. Not to any depth, but just to kind of have an overview of some of the other songs. I found this super useful with The Darkness, because they would randomly just be like, oh, let's just play this song tonight, and I'd be like, well, all right, and I'd heard it, but I'd have to actively learn it, but it wasn't from zero, if that makes sense. Also, I did this gig with Brian Ferry. I was doing about this the other day, actually, weirdly. It was a New Year's Eve gig, and it was for Prince's party. It was one of Prince's party a long time ago, and we kind of didn't know what we were going to be playing until the day, and it might not have even happened. So I was peripherally is that right? Peripherally learning other songs of Brian's that I hadn't played before. Obviously listening to a ton of Prince's stuff. I was more actively learning those, partly because I love Prince anyway, so it's just a really nice excuse. And let me tell you, his back catalogue, first of all, incredible, but my God, so many songs. So many songs. So yeah, I think learning like I say, just a basic knowledge of the background of other songs, so that you can get a vibe, also so that you can, if needs be, learn them a little quicker, like you've got some sort of reference point if that happens. And let me tell you, it does, because weird stuff happens. So once you've kind of like done all that sort of stuff, I suppose the next stage for me is to just start doing the work. And you know, it it sounds so obvious, but I can't tell you the amount of rehearsals that I've rocked up to where musicians just haven't learnt some of the songs, like, or not properly, and I'm like, I don't understand, because look, again, weird things happen in rehearsals, and the way that I see it, I kind of operate on the basis of, and this is from my experience, that when I come into rehearsals, I need to know the material as if we're about to play a gig. Now, like I say, this is because of my background. It's because I found myself in situations like Tricky, for instance. Oh no, we did do rehearsals, but not with him. So, but you have to be in a place where I could get on stage right now and play a gig. Yeah, it would probably be not perfect, but I could do the job, sort of sketch. And that is always my baseline, always. And that has served me so well. I can't tell you the amount of times that that saved me. Like, even when I was playing with The Darkness, we went to go do a tour around Ireland, and we were meant to do 3 days rehearsals. And I think it was because, I think Justin got delayed maybe, and then we were also in fact, if you've seen the Darkness documentary, so the guy that was doing that, Emmett, Simon Emmett, it's definitely Emmett. Oh my god, I don't think his name's Simon though. Emmett, oh crikey. Anyway, he was there documenting some bits and bobs, which you will see in that film, in that documentary. And because he was there, we had 3 days rehearsal. I think it was 3 days. And after the first day, where Justin wasn't there because he was delayed, me, Frankie and Dan had run the set. And by the time that Justin got there, if I remember correctly, and my memory is shocking, but if I remember correctly, he got there and was like, how did rehearsals go yesterday? And the guys were like, yeah, it went really well. Like, it's good. And then Just was like, all right, cool. Why don't we shoot a music video tomorrow instead? And that was a music video for Open Fire. That was shot on one of the days we were meant to rehearse. So we didn't actually rehearse all together before our first show. The first time that the four of us played together with a view to a show, we'd played together when I came to audition, and also obviously we'd recorded the album, although arguably we weren't necessarily, well, we were playing together when it came to pre-production. Anyway, sorry, I'm literally, you're inside my brain right now. So the first time that we played any songs together was soundcheck the day of the first show, and then playing the full set was the first set that we played together on stage. But it's because I think I operate with this way of like, I will come in and I will be ready. Like that is how I roll. And yes, mainly that was to do with my insecurities, my just anxiety. Like, it's the way that I can minimize my anxiety. In the past, I'm kind of better now, and it just meant me knowing everything inside and out. So anyway, I don't know why that's why it's important to sort of like do the work first. So learn the songs, very, very important, very, very obvious. Then record yourself and listen back, because although you may feel like you know the songs, let me tell you from experience, sometimes you record yourself and listen back, not as good as you think. But I tell you what, although it's difficult and although it can be jarring, at least you know that it's honest, and at least you know by the time that you get to a place where when you record yourself and listen back, that you're like, I don't hate it, because that's what I aim for. I don't think I've ever, no, that's a lie. I think a couple of times I've been like, oh my gosh, I think that sounds okay, or good even. That's the maximum I've ever felt about something that I've played. But yeah, if I can get to that place of like, I don't hate this, then I'm like, okay, cool. It's acceptable to me. It's acceptable, and then anything else on top of that is a bonus. Oh, my neck just clicked. I've been having some problems with my neck clicking recently. I don't really know why. So anyway, that's recording yourself and listening back. So that's sort of the audio version of things, which is very important. The next level of it is filming yourself, watching back and repeating. And this is to do with performance, which I will do another episode on performance. Because again, Louis was asking about this. Just like, what do you mean by performance? And for me, it's this sort of like conviction of the songs. It's being in the songs, it's moving within the music to portray the songs and just to make it, what's the word, like visceral, I suppose, like creating emotion through motion, I suppose. So again, if you film yourself and you watch it back and you go, I look bored, and you know it's an energetic song or whatever, if the movement doesn't fit the song, if the performance doesn't fit the song, and that can go the other way, if it's too big for a ballad or whatever, like a gentle or a very emotive slow ballad, if you're giving me big arms and all this or big movements, no, not good. But if you watch it back and you're like, I'm bored, everyone else is going to be bored. If you're thinking, why would someone watch this? Change it. Like, you are there to entertain, you are there to put on a show. It's literally called a show. So, and also, in fact, let's forget about that in terms of putting on a show. Look at how comfortable you look, because if someone looks stiff when they're playing, I guarantee you it's going to sound that way. And even if it doesn't, there is something psychologically about seeing someone play in a stiff way that makes you think that they're playing stiffly. I've had that so often where I will watch someone and they look like they're fighting their instrument, like it is uncomfortable, it is difficult, and I'm like, oh god, I don't think they're very good, or I don't think they're doing their job very well, whatever. But then I'll close my eyes and listen and it sounds fantastic, and I'm like, wow, the power of the visual aspect is very important. Equally, people can play with great conviction and confidence, and you close your eyes, it's nothing special, but they look like they're really like committed and digging in, as someone once said to me, which I think is such a great way of seeing it. Like, you're bedded in with the music. There is a visual element to that. So I think filming yourself and watching it back and just, you know, noticing what is going on, I think is really, really useful. Also, in sort of tandem with this is playing the set as a set, because I often find this as well. I find that people will happily practice songs as standalone songs rather than as part of, you know, a 15-song set where you are going to have energy needed. Like, you are going to need a certain level of concentration and focus, and they don't practice that part of it. Also, practical things like, if you're using in-ears, practice with in-ears, because it is going to be different. It is going to be different if you are if you're practicing with monitors versus in-ears. So yeah, always good to practice as close to the actual, like, not close in time, close in the way that you're doing it, close to what the actual gig is going to be. So practice with your in-ears, practice with your stage clothes. For me, that often meant with particular shoes. I know that sounds absolutely insane, but it's true. I will often wear big DM boots with a heel. So I need to practice with that, because my bass drum movement of my leg is very different if I'm wearing flat trainers or Vans or whatever versus heeled boots. So I need to practice that. Let me tell you also, never play in wellies. Weirdest thing for drummers, playing in wellies or flip-flops. Not fun. Don't do it. It will impede your ability. It doesn't matter how good you are. I've never spent the time and I don't intend to. Wellies never look good, and flip-flops, I'm not about having my feet out. People are weird about feet, and like, yeah, the amount of, can I tell you, and if you're one of these people, goodness gracious, the amount of requests that I get for people to play barefoot and film it, and I'm like, nah man, it's not my vibe. But anyway, so what else was I saying? So yeah, practicing with the gear, as it were. So, and if you're running track, as I spoke about earlier, run the track. The reality is that when you're in your rehearsal space, this will be the most relaxed that you're going to be. Everything else, every other time you do it, there will be stresses, you will feel anxious, there will be things going on around you that you can't control. If you can't get to a place where you're comfortable in your own space, then you need to do it more. My whole... This is what I aim for. This does not sound rock and roll. This is not living the dream, but it's what I aim for, and it seems to work. Is I try to practice things until I'm bored of them. And I'm not saying looking bored when I'm playing it or performing it, but it's so rote that I'm like, this is so dull. I'm just doing this. Whatever. I'm just doing it because I have to do it so that I know that I know it. Blah, 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 blah. When I get to that point, I'm like, cool, I'm ready. Like, I'm over it. That's what it is. I'm over it. I'm so over this. And I'm like, cool, I'm ready. Okay, great. Because then you can truly be in the moment with the other musicians. You can soak in the atmosphere of the gig. You can soak in the atmosphere of the audience. You can react to anything that goes wrong. Things will go wrong. That's part of the job. And I'll be able to stay calm because what I'm doing on the drums is in my bones. I'm just like, it's just what I do. Like, I can pay attention to other things if I need to. You know, if something's happening with another musician on stage, I can sort of like notice and get someone's attention to go help them, for instance, or whatever. And I know I can do that because my body is just doing the thing, and I'm so over it that I'm like, yeah, we know how to do this. This isn't a thing. So that is the point that I get to. And I know it doesn't sound very glamorous. And do you know what? It's not. It's really not. I need to get to the point of just being over it. And I find that that's a good marker. I really, really do. It takes time. It really, really does. And as I say, and it's not over it in a way that when you watch it back when you're filming yourself, you're like, oh, I look over it. I look bored. But, you know, just you then have the space to integrate what else is going on, basically, in the moment. Very, very important. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I get to when it comes to being prepared for a named gig. And then the only other things that I do are things on the periphery, things like exercising, make sure that my fitness is up to scratch as much as I can. What I will say is that I don't care how ready you think you are for a gig fitness-wise or playing-wise. If you're going on tour, after that first show, you will always feel like exhausted and stiff and like not as relaxed as you thought you would be, or more out of breath than you thought you would be. You thought you were fit and now you're like, oh my god, like I was not ready for this. You will never be prepared until you are already sort of on the road doing the thing, and your body adjusts pretty quickly. Other than that, rest I think is so important. Something that I didn't used to do. Now I really appreciate. I realize how important it is. Things like, you know, sleeping well beforehand. Don't do like, you know, 10-hour long rehearsal sessions with yourself, like practice sessions. Don't do it. Do like 3 hours intensely maximum. That's my maximum. Maybe 4, maybe. And then rest. You know, go nap. Go have a bath. That's my thing. Go have a bath. Go cook. That's my thing. Like, and that brings me on to the next thing: nutrition. Like, make sure you're eating well. Make sure you're putting good stuff into your body. Because again, let me tell you, for years I was in rehearsals. I would be eating nothing but junk. I would be running off of cans of Coke and, you know, Snickers bars or whatever. And honestly, like I was in such a state. I was kind of, how do I describe this? It felt like I was scrambling and only just always hanging on to the edge of life, of just managing to do everything just about. But there were some situations that, like, oh my god, it was just, and I would make myself sick. You know, I would exhaust myself. I would be completely burnt out, and end up, you know, my drumming would suffer. The people the gigs I was doing would suffer. And my mental health was in the worst state possible. And yeah, so health in terms of exercise and food, very, very important. And rest. Please rest. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. Like, there is nothing better than having a clear-ish head when you're starting up a practice routine. Also, something that I used to do, I don't do it so much now, but something I found really useful, which might be worth trying if this appeals to you, is when I would learn stuff, when I was practicing new things, I would practice them for say an hour, and then I would go and have a nap for like half an hour, maybe 90 minutes, because that's my cycle, and I like having 90 minutes. Otherwise I get groggy, I get really like meh, I get really grumpy. So 90 minutes, and then I will get up and then I will come back to it, and things will have embedded in my brain. It's weird, it's really weird. So maybe try that, might work for you. I don't know, maybe not. Worth a shot. But anyway, I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say on the matter. So hopefully that has helped you in some way. And thank you again to Louis for inspiring this question. Again, well done to Louis for absolutely, when I tell you he nailed this gig, this good gig could not have been more nailed by Louis. He is a living legend. So, and Ella Henderson, very lucky to have him, I will say that. But yes, anyway, I hope that this helped you too. And even if you're not being called for a named gig just yet, I'd say if you start conducting yourself in this way with all gigs that you're doing, you're kind of going to be, this is going to be normal for you. So yeah, and if you're not out there gigging already, get out there gigging, because that is a really important part of this process in terms of getting onto a named gig. You're not going to come in cold having not done any gig. I feel like I'm safe in saying it's impossible. I know that shouldn't be a thing, and everything is possible. Yes, okay, fine. Maybe it is possible, but if you want to increase your chances, get out there, be gigging. And if you start, like I say, going through this and doing everything you do in this way, by the time you get to a named gig, you just do this anyway, and you are meant to be there. And that's probably the reason that they've called you, is because this is how you conduct yourself. Does that make sense? Hope so. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. If you have enjoyed this episode, please do feel free to like, share and subscribe, all the good stuff. If you would like to support this podcast, you now can over on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Emily Drums, that's patreon.com/Emily Drums, you'll get some early access to episodes. And if you would like one-on-one coaching, then you can reach out to me at emilydrums.com. And we can set up a free discovery call and see what you specifically need, and see if I specifically can help you in what you need. I'll always do that before we start working together, before you pay me any money, because trust me, I need to know that I can get you where you need to be. And also, if you would like me to answer any specific questions, if you would like me to cover any specific topics on this podcast, then if you go to emilydrums.com/AMA, as in ask me anything, then you can ask me a question over there. You can do it anonymously, you can tell me your name, you can go, I would ideally like you to go into as much detail as possible, because it does make it easier for me to answer, rather than just generalizing, because general questions, the scope is so wide, and I will often bring it to a focus, but the chances that is the focus that you're talking about is slim. So please be as specific as you can. It really helps me. It also helps me to be inspired by it as well, when I know if there's a specific situation that you're in or experience that you've had. So yeah, and yeah, anyway. Just let me know. Let me know. emilydrums.com/AMA, as in ask me anything. Right. I shall love you and leave you. I hope that 2025 is treating you well so far. I'm having a nice time. I am. I've been really busy and got some new students, which is great. I love learning about people and the journeys that they're on and what they're up to. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so I'm going to leave you alone. But have a lovely day, and I shall see you next week for another episode. All right, speak soon. Bye.